Good morning, good morning. This is Lady Danny from Landed Gentry's Handcrafted Herbals, coming to you live from the Royal Borough of South Philadelphia. Hiya. Okay, good morning. All right, first was just a very brief article I wanted to bring to your attention by Gretchen Reynolds, and it was about how to be 30 years younger. And this was an interesting study. Article does go to show that if you do exercise now, even as a hobby, it doesn't have to be at an Olympic level, that it can really pay off. And that's one of the things that I constantly preach is, like, I don't think that you need to go out and run a marathon or necessarily train for one. But I do think that you need to get up and move. And this is actually showing for the first time just real life people that do exercise. They're not necessarily doing it to be, super athletes, but it has shown that with time, it does make a big difference. The article by Gretchen Reynolds, it was in this week's New York Times in the wellness section, and here's the gist of it. The muscles of older men and women who have exercised for decades are indistinguishable in many ways from those healthy 25-year-olds, according to an uplifting new study on a group of active septuagenarians. These men and women had much higher aerobic capacities than most people their age, and the study showed making them biologically about 30 years younger than their chronological ages. That's a big one, 30 years. So, statistics and simple observations suggest that many elderly people experience frailty, illness, and dependence. But science hasn't established whether and to what extent such physical decline is inevitable with age, or if it is at least partly the byproduct of our modern lifestyles and perhaps amenable to change. There have been hints, though, that physical activity might alter how we age. Recent studies have found that older athletes have healthier muscles, brains, immune systems, and hearts than people the same age who are sedentary. But many of these studies have concentrated on competitive master athletes, not people who exercise recreationally, and few have included women. So for the new study, which was published in August by the Journal of Applied Physiology, researchers at Ball State University decided to look at distinctive sets of older men and women. We were very interested in people who had started exercising, especially during that running thing during the 70s. Remember that? They took up exercise as a hobby. Some of them maintained that hobby through the next 50 or 60 years, either running or cycling or swimming, otherwise working out often, even if they rarely or never ever competed. Those were the men and women, most of them who are now in their 70s, that he and his colleagues start to study. Then they recruited a second group of age-matched older people who had not exercised during adulthood, and a third group of active young people in their 20s. The young people, they thought, would possess the most robust muscle and aerobic capacities, with lifelong exercisers being slightly weaker on both counts, and the older non-exercisers punier still. But the outcome is not precisely what they found. Instead, they found the muscles of those older people who exercise resembled those of younger people, with as many capillaries and enzymes as theirs and far more muscles than those of the sedentary elderly. The active elderly group did have lower aerobic capacities than the young people, but their capacities were about 40% higher than those inactive peers. 40% higher. So, it really does make a difference if you stay, physically active. In fact, when the researchers compared the active older people's aerobic capacities to those of established data about what is normal in capacities of different ages, they calculated that the aged active group had the cardiovascular health of people 30 years younger than themselves. So, what does the whole thing go to show? These findings, together with muscular and cardiovascular health in active older people, suggest that what we now consider to be normal physical deterioration with aging may not be normal or inevitable. So that's a big thing. So if you're not working out or doing something on a daily basis, or at least, you can see the guidelines used to say like 3 to 5 times a week, and now they're really saying that you need to do it more like close to 5 or 6 times a week. But at minimum a half hour a day. And you don't have to, there's studies that show that you don't have to do 30 minutes at one shot. You can do 10 minutes at a shot. Do whatever it takes, but definitely try and keep yourself physically active, because like I say all the time, we're not really sure how much in the way of health care is going to be available, and what it is available is going to be super expensive. So if you're not exercising regularly now, you should be. Okay, finally, this was an important one for me, because even though my beloved Salem has gone now, and it will be 3 years at Christmas, I think it's really important to know what is good and what is bad for pets during the holiday season. And even though all of us know like some things like chocolate, there's some other things that we need to worry about. So I wanted to go over this article, and I also wanted to let you know that there is an available list from the ASPCA on dangerous foods for animals. And I have done a shortened bit.ly link so that if you are interested in finding out the complete list, then you can go there and get it. It's really important at the holidays, and some of the foods are things that you don't think about. I, for one, was not aware that avocado could be deadly to birds, but there you go. Okay, so while the holidays can leave you with a warm, fuzzy glow, they add a lot of things to that daily mix of your life that may not be good for your pets. Whether it's your treats that upset their stomach, the trees whose needles wind up in their mouths, or well-meaning relatives who feed them off the table, the happiest time of year can quickly become the most dangerous time for our four-legged friends. So here's what you need to know about common holiday pet hazards and how to keep your dog or cat out of the vet's office as part of the warm, fuzzy picture. Food. Okay, this is just the first part. Yes, most of us know that chocolate is bad for pets, but ingredients in a lot of holiday favorites can cause gastrointestinal distress or poisoning too. Garlic and onions at dinner, grapes from the cheese board, and raisins, often found in holiday cookies, are just a few common foods that you need to keep away from pets. Candy that's not chocolate can be problematic too because of all the sugar. To keep your pets totally safe from food, keep them away from where food is being prepared or served. And that includes a trash can, which cats and dogs can get into and dig out fatty scraps and bones. Also make sure that any breads you're making, especially while they're rising or in the fermenting stage, are out of pets' reach, because it can cause gastric distension and gastroenteritis, even alcohol poisoning, because ethanol is a byproduct of the whole yeast and fermentation process. If yeast expands and ferments in a pet's gut, it can be a problem. Even if the food is safe for pets, too much of a good thing can be dangerous too. Cats and dogs who eat too many fatty foods at once can develop pancreatitis, which is an inflammation in the pancreas that can lead to the release of enzymes that shouldn't be there. And most pets will need to be hospitalized for this. Okay? So not too much food. Make sure your guests aren't tucking away potential pet hazards too, especially if coats and purses are put in a room where pets usually stay. And this is a big one, people. Xylitol. Xylitol is an artificial sweetener that's often used in sugar-free gum, breath mints, mouthwash, toothpaste, etc. It is toxic to dogs. So if they get like a hold of Trident sugar-free gum, get to a vet with the most speed possible because it can be incredibly toxic. Of course, your eyes can't always be on your pets, but the following behaviors should point to a problem like drooling, lip licking, pacing, difficulty in getting in a comfortable position, vomiting, or even retching posture and just making the noise of that they're going to vomit without anything coming out. Those are generally signs that they need to see a vet. Okay, the next one is decor. Holiday plants can be a danger zone for pets, especially if you're bringing in poinsettias, lilies, and amaryllises into your home. Pets can get an upset stomach by eating evergreen needles or drinking Christmas tree water if your water is stagnant, as bacteria can grow into it. Tinsel is especially dangerous for cats, who might think those long silver strings are playthings or ingest them by accident while self-grooming. They can be even more hazardous in their gut than something like glass or a needle or thumbtack. A long, thin item in the gut can lead to swelling of the abdominal wall, or worse, even saw through the lower intestine. The same is true for dental floss, so if you're using it, please throw it away responsibly every time that you use it. The other thing is don't leave on lights when a cat is around in case the pet gnaws on the cords, because we've all seen what happens to the cat in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. He said to make sure to cover up the cords as much as you can at all times, especially if you have a puppy at the home, and do not leave candles unattended. This doctor has treated more than one cat whose tail has caught the Hanukkah spirit, literally. So that's another thing. If you do have lit candles and you have dogs or cats that are roaming around, especially if your cats are climbers and climb on tables and things, please, please be very careful. Final one is about people. The best way to set expectations of how your family members should address your pets is to talk to them beforehand. It's really letting them know what their boundaries are. It could be as simple as saying, before you sit down, to please not feed your pet scraps off the table, or if this has been a persistent problem at family meals before, or have a phone conversation with them the day before. If you have time, put treats in a jar marked especially for that pet. That way, if someone wants to give the pet a treat, they can get it from that jar and not from anywhere else. When it's gone, it's gone. Now, a lot of that is definitely going to be easier said than done, because if you're dealing with older relatives, they may not take kindly to you telling them what to do when they've been the one to tell you what to do. But you really need to set your boundaries. And they suggest that sometimes turning the concern away from you and your pet and onto the other person can make the difference. For example, if younger children are roughhousing with pet and not listening to you about their behavior, or the parent is not parenting, and we've seen that a lot, then what you can do is talk to the parent about your concerns for their children, saying something like, "My cat could really hurt your kids, so my concern is the safety of your children." See, that makes it sound like really convincing, huh? Finally, if the hubbub is too much, try and get your pet away from people, like a baby gate or a designated spot in another part of the home, whether it's a room they like or a crate. Just make sure to get your pet used to that before the big day and before everybody descends on your house. Keeping the status quo as much as possible. If you can keep the status quo and you can enrich their environment, they're less stressed about what's going on. However, and this was something I didn't think of, but if you have a big function coming up and you know your pets do not deal with people really well, it might be an idea to either board them or to send them to a relative or somewhere else for the time period, just so that they're not super stressed out. I do know some people that have animals that get really skitzed out if too many people come in, and they kind of hide, and then in the hiding, they don't want to come out for food and drink for sometimes a day or two afterwards. So if you know that your pet's going to have that kind of issue, then you might want to take care. So those are just some ideas. Now, I just wanted to give you some highlights from the list that I pulled up from the ASPCA about food dangers. I'm sorry, I should have printed this out beforehand, but I wanted to give you the heads up. Okay, alcohol. Alcohol you're going to want to avoid with all pets, even in small amounts. Yeah, we've all seen somebody that's done something stupid and boneheaded, like giving a dog some beer and watch them run around and chase their tail, but it really is dangerous. It can lead to abnormal blood acidity. It can also lead to central nervous system depression, and it can even lead to death. So please do not do that. Next one is avocado. Like I said, this was primarily about birds and rabbits. I did not know that this was an issue, but evidently it can cause cardiovascular damage in birds and in other like ruminants like horses, donkeys, sheep, all of those things. I'm generally thinking you're not having those in your home, but if you do, please be aware that if they consume it, they can get what is called edemaceous head, which is basically you get edema and swelling in the whole head and neck area, and that could be deadly. So you want to avoid that. Most of us know about chocolate, but did you know coffee and caffeine can also be an issue with pets? So you need to be aware of that. They can ingest that, and it can make them very sick, cause vomiting, diarrhea, panting. It's not a good one. Citrus. I had a dog that used to like to eat an orange, so that's not too much of a problem if you just have the fruit. However, they do believe that there can be an issue with peels, and especially in large quantities, so you might want to avoid that. Coconut oil has become like the panacea for everything. So a lot of things are cooked with coconut oil. Coconut oil may be around your house, but coconut and coconut oil should be avoided by pets, and coconut water should definitely be avoided because it has high potassium level, and that should not be given to your pet in any way, shape, or form. So if you are one of these coconut water drinkers, please make sure that you keep your bottles closed and away from your pets. Grapes and raisins. Grapes and raisins can cause kidney damage in dogs. So I'm just hitting the highlights on this. If you really want to know the reasons why, they actually give for each thing a description on the ASPCA site. So you can go there and it'll give you exactly why. I'm not up on it exactly. I know it's a compound that's actually in it. So I just did know the one about potassium. I did remember that one. Next one is nuts. And it's not just macadamia nuts. It can be, macadamia nuts can be horrible because usually that one can have weakness, depression, vomiting, tremors. And in dogs, it'll show up within 12 to 24 hours after ingestion. but could be a really serious issue. So you want to keep those away from them, but also any nuts. They're generally high in fat, so it will kind of run through the animal anyway. So if you don't want to have a big mess on your hands with diarrhea all over the place, it's a good idea to keep away from that. Let's see. And also because nuts can cause pancreatitis. And as we discussed, pancreatitis is a serious issue in dogs and cats and will definitely require a vet visit and possibly far more medication and hospitalization than you want to deal with. Garlic, onions, chives, all those vegetables can cause gastro irritation, so you want to stay away from those. Raw or undercooked eggs and bones. I know that people give dogs bones all the time, and that's great if you have like a wilder dog. But really in domesticated dogs and stuff, they can splinter and cause problems. Not so much for bigger dogs that have bigger teeth to be able to gnaw on these things, but for little dogs who always want to do that. It's not just chicken bones that splinter, it's because that used to always be the thing. It's like, you can't give them a chicken bone because that could splinter, but nobody thinks about the big beef bones. Yeah, those can splinter too. And if you don't want to have a punctured stomach to have to deal with over the holidays, it might be best to not get those as well. Let's see what else. Salty snacks and foods. Too much sodium for anybody is bad, but especially in your pets, and it will make them very, very thirsty, which could also cause dehydration, which you don't want. So those should be hidden away. Xylitol, we already talked about being included in many things from sugar-free gums to mints, so you definitely want to avoid that. And finally, yeast dough. As we said, if that ferments in the stomach, not only will it cause distension, which will be just painful for them, but it also can turn into a life-threatening issue. So please make sure that if you are a baker and you're leaving bread out to rise, that you keep it away from dogs and cats, because like I said, the byproduct of that is ethanol. And again, so you're going to have the issue with yeast being bad because it's like starting to ferment and fill up their tummy and causing distension. But then you have the alcohol issue, which can cause a whole nother slew of problems. So keeping all of that in mind, and again, for the full list of the foods and things that you need to be aware of to keep your pets safe over the holidays, please visit the ASPCA. This link will take you directly to the page that gives the list. But while you're there, please feel free to donate to them, because ASPCA does great things to protect our furry four-legged friends. So that is it for the day. Remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, just try and be better people. And if you think any of this information, especially about the pets, the holidays, is useful, feel free to pass this on, because there is nothing worse, well, with the exception of having issues with children over the holidays. For those of us that don't have children, pets are your fur kids, and it is really distressing to see them in a state, especially over the holidays. I do understand your love for pets, and I do understand wanting to keep them safe during the holidays. So it is my hope that by sharing the information, I can keep somebody else from like losing a pet in a horrible way over the holidays, because that's not what you need.